ready to dig into a topic that might seem kind of counterintuitive.
Mm.
We're talking about failure. And not just accepting it, but like really leaning into it as like a stepping stone to
I
success.
love it.
We've got a pretty interesting lineup today. Gary Vaynerchuk, David Goggins, even neuroscientist Dr. Andrew Huberman.
Yeah, that's a diverse group.
You'd think with such different perspectives we'd have a real clash of opinions, but surprisingly, they all agree on one thing.
What's that?
Failure's not something to shy away from. It's actually crucial for achieving success.
Interesting.
It's kind of mind-blowing, right? We've
Right.
got Gary V, who's all about that hustle mentality, talking about leaning into failures. And then you have David Goggins, who's basically built a career on pushing his limits, seeing failure as just another part of the process.
What I find really interesting is how this idea pops up across totally different fields.
It's true.
Think about it. We're hardwired to avoid discomfort, right?
Right.
To stick with what's familiar.
Yeah.
But resourcefulness, that ability to overcome obstacles,
Yeah.
often comes from necessity.
Totally.
It's like Tony Robbins says. Sometimes we miss out on growth because we blame our lack of resources instead of looking inward for solutions. He tells this funny story about Al Gore blaming his presidential loss on not having enough Supreme Court justices on his side.
Oh, wow. Okay. I could see where he's going with that.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in blaming external factors instead of asking ourselves, what could I have done differently?
Exactly. True resourcefulness is about asking, how do I bridge this gap even with the resources I do have?
Yeah.
It's about ingenuity and adaptation.
This whole conversation is making me think about how fear of failure held me back earlier in life.
Yeah.
Like there were so many things I wanted to try,
Uh-huh.
but I was paralyzed by the thought of messing up.
Right?
I wish I had this mindset back then.
Yeah.
It reminds me of what Les Brown talks about in his future authoring program, encouraging people to confront those fears head on and envision a better future for themselves. If I had embraced that kind of thinking, who knows what I could have accomplished.
It's never too late to embrace that mindset. And there's actually some cool neuroscience that backs this up.
Oh, really?
Dr. Andrew Huberman talks about how our brains are literally wired to learn from mistakes. Those errors we make, they're actually signs of growth and change happening at a neurological level.
So it's not just some motivational mumbo-jumbo. Our brains are actually designed to learn this way.
Exactly. Huberman uses this example of how young brains adapt to a shifted visual world much faster than adults. He explains that we can train our adult brains to be more adaptable too.
Okay.
But we need to break down learning into smaller, more manageable steps. That feeling of frustration when we hit a wall, that's actually our brain signaling that it's time to adapt and grow.
That's actually a really empowering way to look at it. So it sounds like we're not doomed to be rigid thinkers after a certain age.
Not at all.
But how do we actually go about reframing failure in our lives? It's one thing to understand the science, but putting it into practice feels different.
Absolutely.
This is where Simon Sinek's work really resonates. He makes a crucial distinction between failure and falling.
Okay.
The language we use really does shape our mindset.
It does.
Sinek talks about this gaming company that throws lessons learned champagne parties whenever they have a major flop. That's amazing. Instead of sweeping those failures under the rug, they're popping champagne and figuring out what went wrong.
It's such a powerful example because it normalizes setbacks and encourages a culture of learning.
It's like saying, hey, we're all in this together. Let's figure out how to grow from this.
And that brings us to a crucial point. It's about building a healthy relationship with failure. It's not about seeking it out, but understanding that it's an inevitable part of growth. David Goggins, with his extreme approach to pushing limits, calls it the ultimate training ground.
I can see why he'd say that. He's all about pushing boundaries and seeing how far you can go.
Right. And he talks about conducting a live autopsy of your failures. Now, before you think that sounds a little intense, it's basically about dissecting your experiences, both successes and failures, to uncover hidden potential and understand your purpose.
So it's about digging deep and analyzing those experiences to extract valuable lessons.
Exactly. It's about asking yourself, what went well? What could I have done differently? What did I learn about myself in the process? This kind of self-reflection can be incredibly powerful.
It reminds me of that point Gary Vaynerchuk made about the difference between what he calls insular failure and external failure. It's like sometimes we're so worried about what other people think that it paralyzes us from taking action.
That's a really important distinction. Insular failure is about your own growth, your own learning process. External failure is about how others perceive your actions. And as Gary Vee points out, Detaching from those external opinions can be incredibly freeing. It allows you to focus on what truly matters, your own growth and development.
So how do we actually put this into practice? We've talked about reframing failure, understanding the neuroscience behind it, even dissecting our experiences. But what are some concrete steps we can take?
Well, Tony Robbins, a master of action, emphasizes the importance of what he calls the 3 S's of breakthroughs: strategy, story, and state. We often get caught up in strategy, the how-to of achieving our goals, but our internal narratives, the stories we tell ourselves, and our emotional state play a huge role in our success.
That makes a lot of sense. Our mindset and emotions can either propel us forward or hold us back.
Absolutely. Robbins uses the example of someone saying, "I've tried everything to lose weight." That's a story they're telling themselves, and it's probably preventing them from seeing solutions.
Because they're so focused on the failure of past attempts that they don't see the possibilities for the future.
Exactly. This relates to the sunk cost fallacy. It's that tendency to continue a behavior because the effort already invested, even if it's no longer serving us. We've all been there. The key is to recognize those negative narratives and actively work to reframe them.
It's about challenging those limiting beliefs and replacing them with empowering ones. So instead of saying, I've tried everything, it's about asking, what haven't I tried yet?
You got it! And that's where mentorship can play a crucial role. Surrounding yourself with people who encourage a growth mindset can make all the difference. Remember Simon Sinek's story about his former boss?
The one who, instead of freaking out when Sinek made a mistake, simply asked, what are you going to do about it?
Exactly. That kind of response fosters trust, encourages problem solving, and ultimately fuels growth. It creates a safe space to experiment, to potentially fall and get back up stronger.
It's like having a safety net, knowing someone believes in your ability to navigate challenges and find solutions.
Precisely. And that brings us back to you. We've covered a lot of ground here, from the science of how our brains learn from mistakes to the importance of mindset, mentorship, even like dissecting our experiences.
Right.
But the real question is, what resonates most with you?
Yeah, out of everything we've discussed, what feels most applicable to your life right now?
It's easy to get caught up in the fear of failure.
True.
It's a natural human instinct. But as we've seen, those setbacks, those falls, they're not the opposite of success. They're often the stepping stones.
It's like those lessons learned champagne celebrations, a tangible reminder that even the biggest flops can hold valuable insights.
Exactly. And that's where embracing imperfection becomes so powerful.
Yeah.
We're all works in progress, right? It's about shifting that perspective from "I'm not there yet" to "I'm learning and growing every step of the way."
And part of that growth is recognizing those internal stories we tell ourselves. It's like Tony Robbins said, divorce your story and marry the truth. What limiting beliefs have you been holding on to? What would it look like to challenge those narratives?
It's about becoming aware of those thought patterns that no longer serve you.
Right.
The ones that keep you stuck in a cycle of fear and inaction.
Like that sunk cost fallacy you mentioned earlier. Sometimes we hold on to things, relationships, projects, even beliefs, simply because we've invested so much time and energy. We're afraid to fail, to admit it's not working. But what if letting go is the biggest breakthrough of all?
What if that perceived failure is actually a redirection, a chance to pursue something more aligned with your values and goals?
It's about asking yourself those tough questions. What do I really want? What's stopping me? And who can I reach out to for support? Remember, mentorship doesn't have to be some formal arrangement. It could be a friend, a colleague, a family member, anyone who embodies that growth mindset and can offer encouragement and guidance.
Someone who can help you reframe those perceived failures as opportunities for learning and growth.
Someone who, like Simon Sinek's boss, trusts you to figure things out even when you stumble.
Because ultimately, it's not about avoiding failure altogether.
Right.
It's about cultivating that resilience, that grit that allows you to navigate the inevitable ups and downs of life.
It's about remembering that every mistake, every setback is a chance to learn, to adapt, and to come back stronger. As Les Brown so powerfully put it, your actions, not your mistakes, define you.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we challenge you. Think of one area in your life where you've been playing it safe, avoiding the possibility of failure. What's one small step you can take outside your comfort zone, knowing that even if you fall, it's an opportunity for growth? Remember, if failure is inevitable, why not embrace it as a tool for achieving your goals?
Think about it, and until next time, happy diving.